Okay, so I've been in academia close on 30 years, working in the field of higher education studies, and my current research is about the question of knowledge and its centrality in debates about teaching and learning. Okay, so this notion of best practices in higher education teaching and learning has been troubling me for quite some time. And so in this paper, I'm arguing, as I mentioned earlier, for a more nuanced understanding of teaching and learning. Okay, so this paper will always be special because of its link to the Haltasa 2019 conference and my keynote, from which this paper drew. And so that event was somewhat of a swan song for me. And so this paper will always be special because of that link. Okay, so in preparing for the keynote and then the paper, what it allowed me to do, I think, was to crystallize, and there was no pun intended when I said that, but to crystallize my thinking about alternatives to best practices approaches to teaching and learning. And I suppose to try and offer some thoughts about what a contextually responsive and knowledge-focused teaching might look like. And so I'm hoping that that's what it does. Okay, so I think the paper raises many more questions than what it answers. But I think the main issue for me, and I presented a bit as a challenge in the paper to the field of academic development, and for them to think about as a field and the academic developers within it, to think about new ways of undertaking academic staff development that takes account of contextualized ways of teaching. In the paper, I'm arguing really that teaching needs to be both contextually responsive and knowledge-focused. So I'm supporting the argument that Ashwin makes in his 2017 book. And what he says is teaching is about making particular aspects of knowledge accessible to particular groups of students, which makes good teaching particular rather than generic. So this is really the argument I'm supporting in the paper. I'm also questioning the idea of singular universal pedagogical practices, and I'm offering some thoughts about what a contextual approach to teaching might look like. And so I'm arguing that pedagogies need to be responsive to more than just learning needs of students and students' social, cultural, and economic contexts. And I'm saying that teaching needs to be responsive to particular students, yes, who they are, the context from which they come, what their learning needs are, but also the context within which teaching and learning take place. So the socially constructed nature of particular universities, the practices within particular faculties and departments are also what teaching needs to be responsive to. But then also teaching is influenced by the particularities of the teaching academics, so who they are, where they come from, what their views of the world are also what teaching needs to be responsive to. And so the genericism which informs best practices approaches fail to take account, in my opinion, of these contextual nuances, or indeed the differences in the nature of knowledge, which I argue should be foregrounded. And so, yeah, in a nutshell, I suppose that's what the paper is about.